Hello and welcome to the instructional video for the MarinMap Situs Editor application. In today's video, I'm going to be walking through some functionality of the Situs Editor application, including some general map features and widgets and tools utilized within the application. To begin the video, I'm going to go over some general map and application functions. At the top left-hand side of the application, you can see we've got the zoom in and zoom out buttons. They're fairly straightforward, and as you would imagine, zoom in zooms you in on the map, and zoom out zooms you back out to your previous extent of the map. You can also utilize your mouse wheel to do this same thing. If you zoom in on your mouse wheel, it will zoom the map in, and if you zoom out towards you on your mouse wheel, it will zoom back out. Below the zoom in and zoom out buttons, we've got the default map view button, which is this button with the home icon on it. And when you select that default map view button, it will zoom you back out to the default map extent of the application when it loads. So if you're in the application and you're zoomed into a specific area and you need to pop back out and get out to that main view, you can tap or click that default map view button and it will bring you back out. The next tool I'd like to go over is the search tool. This tool can be used to search for addresses via the site address or for parcels via the property ID or APN number. So I'll show how that works. I've got an example address here that I will paste in. It is 12 Center Street. I'll enter that in, and you can see here I'm prompted then with search results for 12 Center Street. I'll select that, and it's going to zoom me to 12 Center Street in San Rafael. And I'll remove that search and I'll go back out to my default map extent and I'll show you how the search by property ID or APN number works. I'll paste that in and this should look familiar once it does zoom into that location. It is the same tax parcel tied to 12 Center Street. And now you can see I've got search results here again for my property ID. I'll select that. And that will zoom me directly to that corresponding tax parcel. So pretty simplistic search capabilities here via an address or an APN number. The next tool I'd like to discuss is the second from the left here in our header menu tools, which is the Map Layers tool. So I'm going to select that button and enter that tool. The first thing I'd like to show within the Map Layers tool is the ability to search for a specific map layer. So if I know I want to access roads or routes, I can type in just a simple RO search, and that will return any layers that have RO within the name. So it is a contains search, and it doesn't have to be that exact layer name. So if you know a partial name of the layer you're looking for, you can type in a partial bit of that name and it will filter those map layers in the tool to show you only those layers. So the main reason that we have the Map Layers tool here is at its basic level to turn layers on and off. So if you can see here, I'm turning these layers off by just selecting this check mark next to it, and those layers are turning back on as I turn them back on. There are some further tools available to us within this Map Layers tool. So if I can focus your attention to this ellipsis menu here, I'll select that within the road names layer here, and I can select hide labels, which if you watch these road labels, when I select that will remove those labels. So that show labels will turn it back on, and hide labels will remove those labels. And one thing to mention with this hide and show labels feature is that the labels have to be configured on that map for that to actually show up and work. So if the road names labels layer here did not have labels activated on it, this wouldn't even show up here in this ellipsis menu. The next feature within the Map Layers tool I'd like to discuss is transparency. So I'm going to come to this routes layer here, which is actually this orange road layer here on the map. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select transparency here. And once I enter in that transparency menu, I've got this slider menu that will appear, and I can control how transparent this layer on the map will show up based on what I've entered here on the slider. So you can see on that routes layer on the map, as I slide this up closer to 100% transparency, that layer is getting more see-through and transparent. And when I get it all the way up to 100%, that layer is completely invisible and see-through on the map. And then as I slide that back down to 0%, you can see that layer is showing again. So it can be a really helpful tool for if there's a lot of layers going on in one place and you want to just kind of focus your attention on one specific layer that you're seeing on the map, but still maybe see a partial view of that kind of reference layer that you're looking at. You can do that by adjusting that transparency. So I'll remove my search here, and now you can see within the map layers, all my map layers are showing again because I've removed my search, and I can continue utilizing the application for what I need it for. The next tool I'd like to focus on is the Basemap Gallery tool, which is this tool here with kind of 4 squares on the icon. So I'm going to select into the Basemap Gallery. This is a fairly simplistic tool. What this controls is the base map, which is shown underneath all of the map layers on the application. So by default, it's going to show this aerial imagery, which is county-wide aerial imagery that the county has taken. But we do have the ability to change this to topographic if we'd like, or streets, or Esri's default imagery layer, which isn't going to look very different than the default county aerial imagery, so I won't click into that one, but I'll click back to aerial imagery, and you can see this is back to our default view of the base map with that aerial imagery. So fairly simplistic tool here just to kind of help visualize some of the map layers that you're seeing on the map with different base maps behind them. Lastly, before I get into the Situs Editor tool, I'd like to discuss the Help menu. And it is the far right button here on the header menu, and it says Access Help menu. And basically what this Help menu is designed for is to show some general application information and some instructions on how to interact with the application. So pretty helpful list of bullet points here to help you utilize this application. And to exit this help menu, I just select OK. And you can always access this button at all times just by clicking it again at the top right-hand side of the header there. So I'll click OK to exit the help menu. Now I would like to focus on the Situs Editor tool. This is really the main tool that this application is focused on. And so to enter that, I'll just select this Situs Editor tool. It's got that pencil icon on it at the far left-hand side of the header tools here. So I'll select into that. And within the Situs Editor tool, there's really 3 ways we can use it. I'm going to walk through all 3 of them. But the first is going to be editing existing address points. So to do that, my example here I'm going to use is 12 Center Street here. And all I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to activate this Situs Editor tool and then select an existing site address point. And you'll see once it's selected, this kind of crosshairs icon will show up behind that point. And all I've got here is I've got 3 tabs for attribution, one of which is the address tab. This is where we're going to do the majority of our editing. We've also got this other info tab, which is collecting information based on the editor. That's going to collect automatically, and none of these are actually editable fields, so they're just there for reference. And then same thing with this property info tab. That is information that's automatically collected and attributed. So really where the majority of our energy is going to be focused in this tool when we're editing an existing point is within this address tab here. And so let's say for my example, I need to come in and make an edit to the house number. I could do that. I could also make an edit to the unit type if I need to update that unit number here, make any changes I need to within this attribution here. If I needed to move my point, I've got this move option here within the editor. So if I select move, it's going to highlight that crosshair, and then I can move my point as needed. And all I would do to save that move is exit the move button here just by clicking it again and then selecting this save button. For now, I'm just going to cancel out of that move, and it's going to cancel my edit. But if I reselect that example there, again, if I've made any edits to any of this attribution or made my move, I can go ahead and just save those edits by selecting this far left save button. And then finally, if I've determined that I no longer need this site address point and all of these edits that I just made are moot and I need to actually just completely remove it from the data set, I've got this delete option here. So I can select delete, and that point would then be gone from the site address point data set. So fairly simplistic to make edits to existing data. You just select it on the map once you've activated your Situs Editor tool, and you can make your edits. And the next way to edit data within the Situs Editor tool here is adding a new address point. So again, to do that, I'm just going to need to ensure that the Situs Editor tool is activated and opened up here. And all I'm going to need to do to add a new address point is make a selection on the map of where I need to add that address point. So let's say for this example, I'm going to add again to this 12 Center Street parcel, and let's say this additional dwelling unit in the back needs an address point. So I'm going to just select it with this tool open. And you can see where I've selected on the map is now showing that crosshairs icon, which means my selection has been made. And if that's where I'd like my new address point to be, I can leave that crosshairs there. Or if I need to move that around, I can reselect anywhere on the map to move that crosshair to that location. And all we're going to do here is add the house number. We'll say this is going to be 12. Again for the address, and you can see here we've got a updated domain list here based on where that point was added. It's actually running a buffer of this entire area, and so it's making adding that street name a lot easier. So depending on where you add your point, you're going to get a filtered domain list or drop-down list here of all of the surrounding streets that that address could possibly be addressed off of. So we'll say my address is Center Street here. It's going to select center and then add that suffix automatically. And let's say there is directional in front of that street name. Depending on what I select here from my drop-down list, that directional would also autofill based on my selection within the street name drop-down here. We'll say that my unit type is rear, and my unit is 12A. And it's going to autofill the zip code and mailing city based off of where my point selection is taking place. So it makes that data entry that much easier. It's going to autofill automatically for you. We've got address type here. Let's say this is a unit. And if that's what I'd like to make my update and add my new address with all these attributes, I can just select save, and that would automatically go to that data set and be added to that site address point database. Now, since this is an example here, I will select cancel, and that will cancel all my edits, and you'll see those crosshairs will be removed from view. and I no longer have that edit session open on that new address point. Now I'm going to go over the third way to utilize the Situs Editor tool, and that is adding a new address via an APN or property ID number. So this is helpful for users that might not be able to utilize their keyboard or mouse as well as some other users. This gives them the ability to enter in an APN number, and this tool will actually drop a new Situs point on the centroid of that parcel, so the very center of that parcel. So I've got my example here, which this is the APN number for 12 Center Street here. So I'm going to select that in the tool, and I'm just going to hit enter, and I'll zoom in a little, and you can see that automatically the tool has added that crosshairs to that location at the very center of that tax parcel. So I didn't need to do any mouse clicks. I just entered in that APN number and it dropped it for me. Again, we've got our attribution here that we could add. Let's say we're adding another additional site address point for this dwelling unit here. We can enter in that information, so it's going to be the same, 12 Center Street. We can toggle whether or not this is a deliverable address. We'll say it's not for now. Unit type, again, we will choose rear. Unit will be 12A. And it's going to autofill that zip code and mailing city for us again. And we can select the address type. We'll say unit again. And let's say that we needed to save all that attribution. All we would have to do is select the save button there at the bottom left-hand side of the tool. And one thing to mention with the add by APN or add by property number is that once this is created, you can then select it after you've created it and move it to wherever you need to. So if you do have the ability to utilize your mouse and click a mouse and use your keyboard, this is going to act just like any other point on the map. You can move it and edit it just the same as you can with any other site address point on the map once it's created. So with that, this concludes the MarinMap Situs Editor instructional video. I hope you found it helpful and enjoy utilizing this application. Thank you very much.